And hello, Hearts of Oak. Thanks so much for joining us once again. I'm delighted to have Bernie Spofforth back with us again. Bernie, thanks so much for giving us your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Always good. And your X feed is always a joy to behold. And there is the handle. Make sure you're following Bernie if not already. And as always, lots to get into. And it was this post, I think, which caught my eye, and looking at all the fun things that Labour have subjected us to, and looking at how it's affecting their poll rating. And you said Labour's collapsing the polls, yet seem oblivious to why. Here's a short list of their record over 18 months. Now, the list is much longer. I'll let you click on that, but plan to cancel jury trials, speech and opinion censorship, increased energy costs, and the list goes on. But that poll at the bottom is intriguing. Labour support is almost obliterated. I love that word. According to new polls showing numbers at their historic low. Um, Give me your thoughts, because it's at the end of your post, you made the line which I thought was intriguing. You said they are either planning to lose at the election or planning not to have one. Expand on that, Bernie.
Um, I can't really decide what it is they're attempting to do. They're either complete idealists who believe that their version of socialism will save the West, right? Will save the UK, and suddenly everyone will realize it and they'll all vote for Labour, or they know that they will be absolutely obliterated at the next election. And they're doing all of these enormous anti-democratic changes with no mandate whatsoever, knowing they will get wiped out at the election. But why would they do that? There's always a lot of chatter on X and other social media about, there won't be another election. And I always dismiss that. Of course, there'll be another election until I look at what they're doing. And then I think, could they pull something? Could they pull something before the next election? I don't know. But if you look at the pincer movement that's happening, you've got, and I've written this in other posts as well, but you have this control now taking shape through acts that have come in, and the acts that have come into Parliament are very, very wide. They then sit under a quango, and the quango is allowed through something we call a secondary instrument to fill in the gaps in those acts, and it gives them enormous power to continue squeezing us. So if you look at the surveillance cameras, the digital ID, you look at the interoperability between departments now sharing information. No, they can't. It's not a free-for-all. They actually have to ask for permission, but they can do that. And so to me, it almost looks like Labour's planning for huge mass protests, and you won't be able to because, of course, all of these control mechanisms will be in place. And once they remove juries and you just have a judge deciding, well, you're a troublemaker, you can't use social media, you can't leave your house, you can't go to that part of the country, you can't attend that protest. That silences and controls millions. And so I can't make up my mind. Are Labour just ideologically driven and actually believe what they're doing? Or do they know it's already a failure and they're trying to protect themselves? Who knows?
Yeah, because I scratch my head watching Keir Starmer, watching the Beth Rigby interview or something and you're looking, I think you're clueless, you're utterly thick, and then you think, but you can't be that thick. And then
Yeah.
you look at the front bench and you kind of wonder, am I literally watching an episode of Wallace and Gromit, or is this actually happening? And you're right, it's so difficult to understand that we can't have got ourselves into this level of inept stupidity. That doesn't make sense. Maybe we have, maybe this is what we get from our members of parliament. But you're right. The cunningness, the the danger, the damage that that our MPs are doing to all the laws with
Yeah.
no opposition. And you think this maybe we aren't just some Truman Show. I don't know.
I find it deeply troubling, and I know that they are absolutely committed to globalist policies coming out of the UN. And the press aren't talking about it, the government isn't talking about it. But a month ago, we signed the UN's Digital Global Compact. And that is an absolute shocker. The appendixes in that, look, we've signed up to this. We've signed up to this. And the appendixes within this document, one of them is a futures compact. And what that says is that every decision the government makes must be made for children not born yet. What? 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 So we have to take into account children not born yet in 30, 40, or 100 years and make decisions based on that, but paid for now. Well, we can't afford to pay anything else now. But 193 countries signed up, including us. And for me, I always look at what Labour's doing, and then I look, what's everybody else doing? And we're all following the same kind of agenda. And if you listen to particularly Starmer, he is very agendaist in everything he does. I don't think he's a stupid man. Do I think some of the front benchers are stupid? Yes. Do I think a lot of them are ideologically driven with no experience in the real world because they've never had a private sector job or run a business? Yes. I can see all of that. But behind it is some very deep cunning to remove jury trials when they will have, by removing a jury, will have absolutely no effect on the waiting lists at all. Fixing the loos would have an effect on the waiting lists. Making sure the heating works, getting the prisoner to court on time. All of those things will speed up the process, not removing jury trials. And it's the cunning behind what Labour is doing and what the bureaucracy behind them is supporting them to do that I think is terrifying.
Yep. And here is another part of that terrifying. Just to add to the fear, the terror. And you put this post from GB News: households could get thousands by snitching on neighbours in HMRC, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, the tax crackdown. And yeah, British citizens are set to receive substantial payments. It was intriguing. The GB News article started off by saying you're set to receive substantial payments. It wasn't, holy shit, this is awful, blah blah blah, and then later on, but no, you're set to receive money when you can report on others. This scheme took effect 26th of November. Who knows? And you can get between 15 to 30% discount, it seems to be.
Of the collected tax. So of the recovered tax, you'd get 30% of it.
This is Lord of the Flies, isn't it?
Yeah, but also, how do you know how much tax your neighbour is paying? Yeah, how the hell do you know what your neighbours are paying? How do you know they owe money to HMRC? And it's that. It's very Maoist. In the 16th and 17th centuries in China, they had this social conscience system where literally early curtain twitches, you would get points if you snitched on somebody who was behaving badly. And, I don't believe Britain will have a system of social credit as they do in China. I don't think it'll be replicated in that way. I think it will be a system of permissions. So if you're a very good citizen and you have a mark on your digital ID that you've called HMRC about your neighbours, you're a good citizen, then that'll be great for you. But if people are reporting you a lot, like community notes on X, if you've got lots of people reporting you for lots of different things, then your standing isn't going to look so good, is it? And all of these things sounded like conspiracy theory 4 years ago when we were all told to have vaccine passports. And now look at the legislation put in place to allow this to happen. You know, would you ever think you'd live in a country where your own government paid you to snitch on your neighbours? It's appalling. It's appalling.
And not to have a proper, well, it's appalling, but then not to have a proper debate. When I saw that, I didn't have a chance to look back, but I thought, has anyone reported on this as it happened? Because it's frustrating when you get these large publications. I mean, GB News, they've come out and said, "Oh, well, this has happened. We're all screwed," as opposed to, "This is coming up in 2 weeks. Let's actually mobilize and oppose it." But it seems, as often happens, these things are just slipped under.
Yeah, well, and that's because, particularly under Labour, it did start a lot under the Tories, and it certainly came into huge fashion during Tony Blair and Gordon Brown's time. Is this increase in a kind of devolution of responsibility from MPs into quangos? We've got over 600 of them, and these, like I said to you before, what's happening now is legislation is coming through in the widest possible way. If you look at the Ofcom online safety bill, the Ofcom itself has the power to change the rules whenever it wants. And that's what's happening now, is that fewer and fewer detail is being discussed by MPs. And these statutory instruments, all that happens is that a quango wants to change something like that, for instance, and it gets what they call laid before MPs for 21 days. Now, I don't know if you've been to the Houses of Parliament, but I got given a tour of the House of Lords. And in one of these rooms, this huge chamber, there were loads and loads of tables like you'd have in a library, and they were stacked 2 or 3 foot high with piles of documents of legislation, proposed legislation, trade deals. How is an MP supposed to read all of that stuff? They don't. And so if they haven't picked up on it in 21 days, guess what? Just slips through. And that's how we end up with all these changes to laws that we never heard about and we didn't know about. That's how it happens. It's just a complete dereliction of responsibility by MPs, and it's been a sneaky change by different governments to take power away from the electorate.
It is, and I've seen those papers stacked high in the Royal Gallery as you walk through, and you see them stacked high on all the tables on the left as you walk in. So, yeah, that is what is happening. Um, let's go on to I've spent a lot of time criticizing Nigel Farage, but this video of him coming out against the BBC was pure theatre that Nigel does like few others. Whenever they talk to friends, school friends, which I guess would have been from the 70s, and found something that Nigel said that the BBC didn't like. It's a 4 minute. We'll just play the first minute and a half. Here's Nigel fighting back.
I thought this morning's performance by one of your lower grade presenters on the Today programme was utterly disgraceful. I think to frame a question around the leader of Reform's relationship with Hitler, which is how she framed it, was despicable, disgusting, beyond belief. Are you surprised that 500,000 people every year refuse to pay the licence fee? But let me say this to you. The double standards and hypocrisy of the BBC are absolutely astonishing. At the time I was alleged to have made these remarks, one of your most popular weekly shows was the Black and White Minstrels, right? The BBC were very happy to use blackface. Oh, and not just in the Black and White Minstrels, you did it in It Ain't Half Hot Mum as well. And what about Alf Garnett? Do you remember what he called Marigold? Do you remember the word he used to describe Marigold on not live, but on primetime national TV? I better not repeat the word, otherwise you'll all use it and say that I used it. Homophobia? It ain't half hot, mum. Are you being served? Oh, and what about Bernard Manning? Perfectly happy at exactly the same time for Bernard Manning to appear on primetime national BBC comedy, telling jokes for which these days you'd probably get a knock at the door from our thought police and perhaps get a 31-month prison sentence. I cannot put up with the double standards of the BBC about what I'm alleged to have said 49 years ago and what you were putting out on mainstream content. So I want an apology from the BBC for virtually everything you did throughout the 1970s and 80s. And I will respond to your direct question. I've received many letters over the course of the last few days from people that I was at school with. This one I think is particularly relevant. I was a Jewish pupil at Dulwich College at the same time, and I remember him very well. While there was plenty of macho.
Will not go to the whole, but what they supposedly talked to someone who supposedly said that Nigel once said that Hitler was right 50 years ago, and now it's the BBC at their lowest. And Nigel came back so well with highlighting what they're putting out, and obviously the BBC were happy with content, but are not happy with a certain Mr. Farage mentioning something possibly on the school playground. I mean, it's the lowest of the low.
For someone like me, I'm virtually speechless at the hypocrisy of the BBC. They're so careful with their misinformation and disinformation, their fact checking. They've just come off the back of doctoring a Trump video. They've just come off the back of having to admit how anti-Semitic their reporting has been through the Palestine-Israel conflict. And yet, on the say-so of some person, they think it's okay to say what they've said about Nigel Farage or anybody. Or it could have been anybody. It's just totally hypocritical. It's outrageous. I can't, and last night you got Question Time, where they had invited illegal immigrants who came here illegally, which is a criminal offence, into their audience to cross-question elected MPs. I find it just mind-numbingly stupid of them. And they wonder why no one's going to continue buying their license fee. No one wants it. We don't want a BBC that does this because it's just a state broadcaster now, isn't it? Literally, it's the state's mouthpiece.
It is, and that Question Time Horrendous will not even show that, where they're basically shipping people in to criticise, as I think Zia Yusuf was there from Reform, and how surely there are enough Brits you can find in the local area without having to send boats to France. But yeah, that's a
crazy
whole other area. And whether or not that guy did have an earpiece, I don't know. I've seen close-up pictures, which would be another story to add to the BBC's failure. Now, Bertie, you put this out. This is one saving grace. And Nigel talked about you get a knock on your door. You have been singing the praises here of Free Speech Union and Toby Young. And on this video, Toby said they get around 75 requests a week for help. And since they were founded in February 2020, they have fought 5,000 cases. It's again, do you want to just touch on this and encourage the viewers and listeners to make use of the great work the Free Speech Union are doing at an extremely low price?
Yeah, it's the only system you have where there is absolute support and backup against the circumstance you find yourself in. And as Toby has said, look, lots of people, lots of very visual people contact the Free Speech Union for help. But what Toby has said in that post is that they're helping ordinary people, just ordinary people who are losing their jobs because they don't want to share a toilet with, women don't want to share a toilet with a bloke, or they've said something that they shouldn't have said, rules that they don't even know exist, they're breaking. And those are the types of people that the Free Speech Union are desperate to help. And, after my arrest, they were monumentally good and have continued to be incredibly supportive. Even just checking up on me. How are you doing? Are you okay? And I just think that's a fantastic system. I think it's a great service. They have gold, silver, and bronze. Go straight in at the silver, people. I know you can afford it because you can't put a price on your own free speech and your protection if you say something someone doesn't like. And if you look at the new rules in place, again, all done without a real debate in Parliament, you can say anything now. You can say anything that you didn't mean to be offensive. You didn't mean it to be inciting anything. But if somebody reports you to the police, you can be arrested. And how many times have we seen it? If 30 people a day, up to 30 people a day, are being arrested by the police for something they have said on social media, you need somebody to turn to. And I would absolutely back the Free Speech Union. I'd also say, and I think it's important that your viewers know this, is that they are very well connected in the States. The States are incredibly concerned about what's happening here. And they work with them a lot to try and explain what's happening over in the UK to our rights and our freedoms. And I think they're doing a great job, really do. Happy to support them.
No, on freespeechunion.org, you can actually gift membership. It's like $8.99 a month, which does seem like a bargain. You can actually give it to, maybe that could be an option of giving as a Christmas
That's
present.
a great idea.
Bernie has needed it, and it looks like we are all in danger of needing that. And of course, if this happens, this next story, then we won't need any knock on the door. And Bernie put up live facial recognition cameras planned for every town centre, and it was on the front of the Daily Telegraph. It was yesterday. Police plan for Face ID in every town, and they will scour the passport database with 45 million Brits on that. Um, Again, we were never asked. I see these vans all around, popping up around the place. The Met Police are allowed to park on a footpath in the middle of the road and shove their camera up outside schools. I've seen them collecting pictures of children, obviously walking around in the school. All types of questions. Um, do we need live facial recognition in every town, Bernie?
That post I put up yesterday, I nearly choked on my breakfast because I knew it was going to be bad, but I didn't know it was going to be quite as bad, is all the people saying how great it is because it will cut down crime, right? And I just want to say, seriously, guys, if you're a criminal, right, if you're a criminal and you know the police have got facial recognition software, right, you're going to cover your face. So it isn't going to catch any criminals. 1. 2, it only covers passport holders. So all the worries that people have about illegal migrants in the country, well, guess what, guys? They don't have British passports. So they're not going to be recognized by this system. And the third thing is, how do you know if you've broken the law when the laws keep changing? And when it's not debated in Parliament, when it's just added to. So that facial recognition comes off the back of a couple of pieces of legislation, acts that are now, they were agreed by Parliament, but that are covered by those quangos again. So they can increase in scope and scale all the time. One is the Police Crime Courts and Sentencing Act, and the other is the Data Use and Fraud Act. And both of those together talk about this kind of thing. And if you even again look at Ofcom, they have a little sentence in there that talks about when the technology is available, then what they'd like to do is something called client-side scanning. Now, client-side scanning is on your mobile phone, right? So when you type a message on WhatsApp, before you press send, the phone registers what you were going to send. It's cleared through a government software database. If it likes what you're going to send, you can send it. But if you've used a trigger word, your message won't send, right? So all of this legislation enables and allows greater use of facial recognition. And I don't really think there's a lot we can do about it. Now, they're going to have this public consultation. Have you been invited? Do you know how to get on it? Have you looked? Nah, they probably don't want people like you. They want the civil society groups to get involved. And the civil society groups are all of those people, of course, that will absolutely love this. And the companies that will love it, the digital ID people that will love it. It all dovetails together, everything.
And it becomes an industry, I guess, and then companies
is
are
an
part of that
industry.
industry,
Yeah.
and then they make money, and
Yeah.
why would you stop it? And then
Yeah, exactly.
all
And
these
that's why I
databases.
said, and sorry, that's why I said my brain hurts because I can't decide if Labour are stupid or if this is just incredibly cunning. And like I say, I'm sure lots of them are a bit thick. I'm sure lots of them are lovely people and perhaps just, in my opinion, misguided. But I think there's some deep cunning going on.
I think so. I think the Keir Starmer could really be Baldrick, and really he is cunning behind the scenes. And you've got that facade of stupidity, because if he's risen to the less CPS, all of that stuff, he's not a thick
No,
person,
no.
so it has to be a facade. But yeah. Um, let's touch on tax, and it is this one. Why work? Why work? This is a story from the Telegraph. I've claimed universal credit for the last 6 years. Work simply isn't worth it. That line is frightening on where we are going as a nation, with the highest tax spend since Second World War, and of course the highest was before with the Conservative, and then Labour have just added to that. Um, but yeah, you said after one sucking off the tits of those who work because she can't be arsed, and it's all a bit hard. And you may as well just lie in bed all day and get paid. It sounds like a win-win.
Yeah, I think lots of things on this subject, obviously. But what COVID did, and I don't blame everything on the lockdowns, because, as I say, I think a lot of this has been building up for a long time for many different reasons. But if you look back to COVID and the lockdowns, people spent all of their time at home. They got paid 80% of their salary in the private sector, 100% of their salary in the civil and public sector. I know there were lots of self-employed people who didn't get paid at all. I do recognize that, but it kind of showed people how much better their life would be if they didn't have to get up at 5:45, travel 2 hours on a train to get to a job, spend all that money getting home again. They were exhausted and they only just broke even, right? So that has been a lot to blame with work ethic. Then the working from home, everybody loved doing that too. So I think a lot of people's work ethic has changed. But I also think that because of the way our elections work, no party will get into power by saying we're going to cut welfare and we're going to cut benefits, right? They just won't win. And if you look now, between 50 and 60% of the population in the UK claims some kind of benefit. So It's a very hot, and that's why I always say every party is lying to you, because they can't tell you the truth. If they told you the truth, you wouldn't vote for them. And with this particular instance now, when we're looking at Labour, and again, is it stupidity or are they being cunning? So if they look to cut benefits, they know their MPs will lose their seats. That absolutely. So they have to keep it. Are they ideological? Yes, they are. But what else is going on? Because actually, unemployment is now rising. How are they going to afford to pay all of those people? They're investing in AI. AI is going to remove millions of white-collar jobs. How are they going to pay that welfare? And I just scratch my head thinking, where do you think the growth is going to come from to entice these lazy people out of their fantastic lifestyle back to work? I actually think this situation for Labour in particular is an absolute mess. It's an absolute mess for them. And we have to cut welfare. People have to go to work. Look, I look at young people around me, and I've got grown-up children now. And my son is on the cusp. If he dropped 2 or 3 hours from work, he could claim benefits. And he absolutely despises the people that do. Absolutely. He'd rather work 3 jobs than claim a penny. But those people, that group is getting smaller and smaller.
It is. And the welfare spend, I think I read it was 320 billion, which is, I think, 23 or 24% of our budget. At some point, it has to stop ballooning and reduce it, but I don't think that's going to happen.
And it makes no sense anyway. So they keep saying we're lifting children out of poverty. No, you're not. You're giving parents a better ability to do less work, buy more fags, go out with their friends, buy their Adidas trainers. That's what you're doing, because the measure of poverty has changed. So in the 60s, 70s, 80s, the measure of poverty was going to the butchers, seeing if they had any bones left at the end of the day and using that to make casseroles, right? We would consider that person poor. Today, if you don't have enough money, you've got the Trussell Trust. Brilliant. What a great business that is. And you can go and collect free food, even though you're getting benefits and welfare and disability. Look, I'm not saying that there aren't people in this country in absolute dire straits, but they're the people working. They're the people that don't quite have enough after working all month to pay their bills, buy their food, or have another child. And no one's taking care of them at all. Their tax just went up. And that is not a fair system.
Yeah, and the 2-child benefit, that cap being moved, and the line is no child should be punished for the situation they're in. That is true. But no taxpayer should be punished for the choices of another person either. And it seems these contrasting these contrasting views, and at the end, actually, it's the person who works harder loses out at the end of the day.
That is very true. And it's all back to big state, because Labour believes that they are the entity you should turn to. And the more people depend on them, the more likely they are to vote for them. And that's just the way they see it. Free school breakfast clubs, they're not free. We're paying. Free school lunches, they're not free. You're paying. All of this makes people dependent on the state. And that, of course, Labour believes is a vote winner.
It does. Let's move on to what's happening in Ireland. This is Enoch Burke being jailed again. I know we've discussed this, and there are all different parts to this, but I'll just play just a minute of this.
Their orders are ready for collection. Okay. This is Enoch Burke, the teacher who has refused to deny his Christian belief and bow to transgender ideology. We're here at the Four Courts again in Dublin, where Enoch's case was again before Mr. Justice Brian Cregan. and he had a number of matters to deal with today in relation to the case. But at the beginning, he said, if any member of the Burke family so much as speaks, they will be removed by Gardaí. So this is the situation we are in. Lies are being told from the bench. Enoch Burke, his name blackened, the constitution set at naught, the law disregarded, and if a person so much as speaks a word, they will be removed by a battalion of Gardaí.
Judge Cregan today has given us a new version.
Will not play it all. There was a line in it said, "Judge jails Enoch Burke for Christmas with effective life sentence. It's a dark and shameful day in Ireland. Enoch Burke is an exemplary teacher and a man of integrity. His only crime is that he refuses to endorse transgenderism and bow to a satanic ideology." The world has seen what has happened because he doesn't use certain pronouns, and it seems as though this has been going on a lifetime. What are your thoughts on this, Bernie?
So they're quite mixed, actually, because on the face of it, it seems like he's being treated appallingly. I completely get that. But he was dismissed because he refused to recognize pronouns. He's deeply Christian beliefs, and he just basically doesn't believe it. He had a disciplinary with the school, didn't he? That was the original thing, and he took action against the school for firing him, basically for misconduct, for not recognizing these pronouns, refusing to do it. I completely get all of that. My understanding of this case is that he keeps being sent back to court because he keeps trespassing on the school grounds. So he's saying, you should never have removed me in the first place. Therefore, I have a right to be here. Therefore, I have a right to teach. And what the school is saying is, no, right? You've been fired. That's the civil case. You now keep trespassing on the school's property. That's criminal. And so I can kind of see both sides of this. Do I think the judge is heavy-handed? Yes. But will he stop going on the school's grounds? No. So what do you do? What does a court do? If you're told, you can't go back into this particular property and you repeatedly do it because you believe something else, the two things aren't connected. And that's what troubles me about this case. Do I think he was right to be fired in the first place? Of course not. Of course not. How utterly ridiculous, outrageous, and he probably has a great civil suit. I just don't know if he's doing himself any favors by committing a different offense, if that makes sense.
No, it does, and he's not, and certainly the Irish government aren't, because they see a former teacher in chains, and that doesn't make Ireland look good. And it's there is a PR battle, obviously. The issue is vital, but I get where you're coming from. We need to be wise, but maybe he believes this is the cause, this is the hill he will die on, and we'll keep pushing it. But
and if that is the case, then I absolutely admire him. Free speech is not free. It's very expensive, and it depends how much you can afford. And if he's decided he will go to prison in order to keep going back to that school because he believes he was unfairly dismissed, then you've got to admire him for doing that. I just don't think I agree with his route, right? It's a school. Leave the kids. Sort your problem out over here. That's kind of how I see it.
No, fair enough. That's a fair point. Let's see where we can go. Let's go to Germany, and this is the fear of bad Putin, and this was talked about, I think, a month ago. I thought Germany had rejected it, but it seems though it's come back in again. German youth in the streets against military conscription. We don't want to be cannon fodder, which is a perfectly reasonable, because there's going to be children, I guess, that are going to be brought up in, or young men, young women. The law provides for the first phase of voluntary recruitment. Voluntary, I love it, the way it always starts voluntary, Bernie. But if 20,000 volunteers do not turn up, the Bundestag is continuing a conscription lottery. What are your thoughts? Because this was today. There were this boycott there, and they don't want to die. Why should you be sending your children? They finish school, maybe university, ready to start the workplace, and you decide to send them to the front line to kill them. There's something dark about this, isn't there, Bernie?
Massively dark. There's no threat. There's no threat to Germany. There's no threat to their country at all. I understand that there's probably some nuanced arguments to have here about the Russia-Ukraine war, but I don't believe in 2025 we should be conscripting young men to fight a war that is not protecting their own country. I just don't believe in that at all. And I think I say in that post that you might, I think it's today actually that it's happening. Huge protests, all the kids coming out of school, no one's going, they're marching. And I think the government's going to get a shock when they see how many parents are marching with them, because they don't want their children used as cannon fodder for a war that is not theirs either. Look, and I know there are lots of arguments on both sides where people say, look, we should be defending that country because they were invaded. There are lots of other people that say they're not in NATO, it's not our job. And there are other people that say it probably should belong to Russia anyway, right? I've heard all the arguments. I don't care about any of them. What I care about is that Germany and Britain have spent a long time, many years, telling us that nationalism is bad, right? You shouldn't be fighting for your country. You shouldn't be flying English flags, for example, or British flags. That makes you, it makes you insular, and you're not global enough. And now they're saying, no, now we want you to fight for your country. Well, make your mind up. Just make your mind up. Can you imagine what would happen here in the UK? I just can't see it. I just can't see it that any of our young men would want to go to war for Ukraine either. Not that they could, since we've only got 27 working tanks. The new tanks make you deaf. Send all our weapons to Ukraine. We don't even have a bullet. Hello. I'm not sure how we're going to war.
No, Bernie, I think we have 3 days of ammunition if we went to war. So we've got a good 72 hours to fight. But I wonder how dark this is, because you see Germany, you see the rise of the AfD being the most popular party. I could actually see this, that actually they go through people's social media posts, and if you're pro AfD, then you're the ones that get called up and put in the front line.
Oh, yeah.
That's where we're going.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, Germany doesn't want to have an election. It doesn't really want the AfD involved, right? Because it knows it'll win. It's tried to ban the AfD as a far-right party. It hasn't quite been able to do that yet. But wouldn't it be great if they were at war and they could issue some emergency, like legislation really quickly so they couldn't have an election? That would be a bit useful.
Yeah. It would make sense, but of course they wouldn't think that darkly.
No, absolutely not.
Let's mention about the jury trials, and this is a great video by Crew Cairn Gazette, who do fantastic videos, and this is on the Lamibot 3000 breaking news we bring you, and here it is.
Good evening, comrades, allies, and people on complex journeys. As your proudly progressive Lord Chancellor, I can confirm that from tonight, we are scrapping judges, scrapping juries, and, frankly, scrapping the whole dusty court system. Instead, every case in Britain will now be decided by one glorious creation of social justice engineering, Lamibot 3000. No wigs, no wood panelling, no 12 confused people from Wetherspoons. You simply stand on a mat while Lamibot scans your face, your X history, your Spotify playlists, and how quickly you posted a black square in 2020. It calculates your privilege score, cross-references your pronoun usage, and checks if you've ever typed the words, "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking." If you have Lamibot gently flashes red and says, Under the Equality, Diversity and Historic Tweets Act, you are structurally guilty. There is an appeal process. You may go free if you film a tearful apology video. Subscribe to my podcast and share it with the caption, "I'm learning and I'm listening." This is not the end of justice. This is justice upgraded to LAMIOS.
I love the way it said supreme leader.
I absolutely love that. I absolutely
laugh
love
or
it.
you cry.
It's so brilliant, and it's so going to happen. I give it 10 years, and that's what we'll be doing.
But of course, there's no, as you mentioned before, it doesn't affect, you get rid of jury trials and it doesn't affect
No,
the backlog.
no.
So I know I talked to one lawyer, the legal case we have with Liz. We are now waiting 14 months for the court to come back to give us a date to enforce the judge's decision that was made 2 years ago. And I talked to a lawyer and they said, well, they're waiting 3 years for cases.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
you can't,
I
it's
spoke to a
broken.
criminal lawyer. And he said that it's just absolutely appalling for people on remand, particularly people on remand where their sentence, if they're found guilty, would be, say, 6 months. But they're on remand for 3 years. So they're doing 2.5 years longer than their sentence would have been anyway. And the court system, I've been reading up a lot about it. I've been looking at a lot of lawyer threads on X, and the condition of the courtrooms and the efficiency of the courts is just absolutely dreadful, as it is in all public services. It's just appalling. But only 5% of our court cases involve a jury anyway. And so it isn't going to speed anything up. Like I said at the beginning, what's going to speed things up is fixing the toilets, working longer hours, which the judges have said they'll do longer sitting hours to get through this backlog, but the government won't do it because it costs money. Hold on a minute. You've just spent 16 billion extra on welfare. Or what about the welfare of the people accused of crimes that they haven't done? There was one poor bloke who I think he spent 2 years on remand for a post on X and wasn't guilty. He wasn't guilty. A jury just dismissed it in 17 minutes. We're in an appalling situation in every single public service. And also, you have to compare it to the private sector. And I would do the same thing with the police, with the NHS, the prison service. When you have no consequences, then what's the point in working hard, right? There are no consequences because these things can't go bankrupt. If you ran a private business as badly as the court system is run, it would fail. It would go bankrupt. But because there are no consequences, there are no sanctions against anybody who works in the civil service. You can't get rid of them, can you? Nothing ever changes. Nothing ever changes. I don't know how we fix it, but it isn't by removing some of our ancient rights to a jury by our to trial by a jury of our peers.
No, exactly. It seems broken Britain. The mantra is failure is rewarded instead of being punished.
Yeah.
We'll let me. I'll just bring this up. We'll not really jump into this is what happens. The OBR, the Office of Budget Responsibility, the supposed independent quango that released information on the budget to show that Rachel Reeves, the government, didn't need actually to raise taxes because there wasn't the gap, the black hole that she said, and the head of the OBR had to resign, not the government. And this is probably an example of the government have enough people that they can point the finger at and blame. So it's never the fault of our MPs. Isn't it wonderful, Bernie? It's never the fault of our leaders. It's always someone else's fault, and someone else has to fall on their sword. so Rachel Reeves can carry on.
But, has he fallen on his sword? What was his severance package? What's his pension? And is he going to be in the House of Lords in a minute? So I'm sorry, I'm really cynical about anybody at that level who resigns because they've done something wrong. The OBR is never right. They have like a tolerance of 9 billion, right? Can you imagine getting your sums 9 billion wrong? That's
And that man, Bernie, oops, I was 9 billion out. Sorry. Is there a punishment? Don't worry.
Yeah, it's completely insane. So I've got no time for the OBR whatsoever. And him resigning, I just think is funny. So just see where he pops up next.
Yeah, certainly on the.
You always fail upwards, don't you? In the civil service, you always fail upwards.
They'll end up on the red benches.
Yeah.
I'll just bring these. We'll not mention it. We'll just bring it up. It can. This is where we could be going. This is how depressing it is. Don't worry, Ed Miliband is here to save us, waiting in the wings. How frightening! And let me bring up this other. I hadn't actually seen this, and I follow Babylon Bee closely, but I haven't seen this one. Akbar replaces "Cheerio, mate" as most popular UK greeting.
Yeah.
It is satire, but it does seem to be coming true. And the changes we are seeing in our society, and Babylon Bee do a fantastic job. It must be difficult to write these stories whenever it's just happening in front of your face. You're not predicting anymore. You're just reporting. It basically just reports the news now. Babylon Bee doesn't.
Yeah, it does. It does. But I did put a post up just saying, just so you know, in the UK, this post could be illegal as soon as there's a definition. That's number one. And number two, it's already an offence if somebody has called the police to complain and say they feel harassed, they feel abused. It's already an offence, which is why, of course, Donald Trump is trying to bring in legislation to say that Ofcom and any other foreign body can't sue US businesses or US citizens for what they say in the US. Can't do it.
I saw Trump talking about that. One of the press secretaries and JD Vance has got into that. So thank God that the administration in the US do understand this problem and are fighting back.
Yeah.
Bernie, always love having you on. You put out so much good information and you highlight, and it's always good to have you on and talk to them. There's never a shortage of things to do. We could do a 2-hour long show, but we'll not. Thank you so much for your time, Verdi.
Thanks for today, Peter. Take care.